Peace family, welcome to African Esquire TV. I'm your host, Tuni Cherie. Before I get started, if you're watching on YouTube, please do like, comment, and subscribe. But in addition, please add yourself to my Telegram group. Telegram is a decentralized platform, and so censorship is not an issue. Also, please add yourself to my channel on Odyssey. Odyssey is also a decentralized version of YouTube. So what we're going to talk about today is something that I'm sure many people have been discussing, many people have been angry about, I've observed, and I think it deserves some more analysis on this specific issue of what's happening in Nigeria. So we know that President Muhammadu Buhari, he is very much disliked by many inside of Nigeria. He is also someone we know who was a colonial Western, neo-colonial Western puppet. He begged America, please bring AFRICOM, to the African continent instead of asking for this imperialist presence to leave. He has been very complicit with many types of European Western governments as far as allowing the co-optation of African resources, African commerce in the interest of white society. So we can see very clearly this is not someone who has Africa and Africa's best interest inside of his heart. But there's also an issue whenever you have outsiders who are the colonialists, who are the imperialists, who get to scapegoat and use certain figures as a way to mask their own agenda inside of the region. And I think that's what's happening, really, if you look at what's happening inside of the issue with Twitter being banned in Nigeria.
Nigeria has listed conditions it wants Twitter to honor before a ban on the microblogging site is rescinded. Nigeria's information minister said Twitter must obtain a license from the country's broadcasting regulator.
I think first and foremost, like I said, Twitter must register as a company in Nigeria. It must be licensed by the Broadcasting Commission, which is the regulatory agency, and must agree not allow its platform to be used by those who are promoting activities that are inimical to the corporate existence of Nigeria.
Last Friday's decision to suspend the platform came days after Twitter deleted a remark by President Muhammadu Buhari. There are nearly 40 million Twitter users in Africa's most populated country.
We are not just banning Twitter because Twitter has been nasty to a particular person. No. We gave a specific reason. Twitter has continued to become the platform of choice for the separatist movement, IPOB. And we think that no country in the world will accept that.
There's been a sharp deterioration of the security situation in Nigeria this year, with deadly attacks on security installations in the southeast and kidnappings in the north and center of the country. President Buhari's security record has been the subject of fierce criticism.
Twitter wasn't ready for that, and it is hard to judge them for it. They had already successfully banned one of the most powerful men in the world and got away with it consequence-free. Nigeria, though, did something about it. The audacity.
We are deeply concerned by the blocking of Twitter in Nigeria. Access to the free and open internet is an essential human right in modern society.
Just put everything down for a sec and appreciate the absolute illogical pandemonium here with me. Twitter, which is very trigger-happy over an arbitrary set of rules to deny people the right to speak out, is trying to be the champion of free speech. You can't make this up. But the ban caught the eye of some politicians who condemned it.
The diplomatic missions of Canada, the European Union, the Republic of Ireland, the United Kingdom and the United States of America convey our disappointment over the government of Nigeria's announcement suspending Twitter. Banning systems of expression is not the answer. These measures inhibit access to information and commerce.
The information monster, even if it appears very attractive, cannot dictate to a foreign state how to live, how to interpret historical events, what movies to watch or what music to listen to. Otherwise, instead of freedom of speech, it becomes a dictatorship of opinion for sole purpose.
and some other politicians who in turn got ideas.
Twitter non-compliance with our rules will lead to unintended consequences, including Twitter losing exemption from liability as an intermediary.
And perhaps more officials should take a closer look at Nigeria handling this. Because if banning a president over an opinion somehow made it into Twitter's definition of free speech, we all need a lesson in how to deal with big tech tyranny.
Twitter has no business deciding on what geopolitical figures have to say about anything because they're not informed enough to do so. They're just are responding based on their own political prejudices with very little knowledge about what the situation involves, especially in Nigeria. Twitter is pretending to be the government of the world. Along with other social media platforms, they are trying to institute their own sort of governmental power. These social media platforms combined have more power than all the nations of the world, in effect, all the states in the world, in terms of political influence. So no, this is not surprising, and it's not unwarranted that these nations would be trying to curb Twitter's political power.
So, brief recap, if you did not see, Muhammadu Buhari posted a tweet, and the tweet that he posted essentially, if it was deemed too far for Twitter, it essentially called for the possibility of violence against Muhammadu Buhari's detractors. Well, this essentially led to Buhari banning Twitter inside of Nigeria, something that you don't usually hear of a leader actually banning an entire social media network from their country. But Trump, is funny, actually cheered on the move because that's probably something he wished he'd done earlier. So this is something that's really unprecedented, right? And because of that, a lot of our Nigerian brothers and sisters who use this as a means of communication, who communicate about their struggles with us, they were very much outraged. They are outraged. They're dealing with this, and they're trying to find ways to ensure that their movement is not being quieted, that their movement to get this puppet out of power is not being quieted. Unfortunately, because people are so angry, there are people who can prey on our resentment, prey on our desire to rid ourselves of these colonial puppets. And I think that the Twitter CEO is someone who is guilty of that. So before we even talk about this specific issue, let's first talk about a previous issue that happened. If you do not remember, Twitter was very much instrumental inside of the EndSARS protest. And we can see how the Twitter CEO was able to masquerade and appeared to be looking out for the best interest of Nigerians, but he actually was able to use social media as a means to divide the EndSARS protest movement, something that we'll see very often whenever you see philanthropists who will fund people who are going to be less detrimental to the colonial situation. So I'm going to read through a couple articles today. I'm going to start with one on Slate. It says, How Twitter Amplified the Divisions That Derailed Nigeria's EndSARS Movement. Yes, Twitter, the same Twitter that some of us are thinking is on our side, the same Twitter that some of us are thinking is the one who should be applauded inside of this struggle. Twitter, too, is very much a part of this colonial situation. Don't think that it's just one person. Yes, Buhari is very bad, but the fact that he's beefing with Twitter, don't think that means Twitter is on your side. Twitter is a capitalist institution that are looking for ways to ensure that they have dominance inside of the region. So let's read this article. It says, in October, when protests against police brutality erupted across Nigeria's major cities, not even the harsh weather could deter crowds of protesters from staging public displays of dissent. With fists in the air, under the downpour of rain, scores of angry protesters, some shirtless and waving the Nigerian flag, chanted, "Who is a bad boy? Buhari is a bad boy," referring to President Muhammadu Buhari. And the commercial capital of Lagos, business activities stopped. For days, Africa's biggest economy was paralyzed as protests got bigger and spread to other cities. The Nigerian government capitulated on October 11th, announcing the dissolution of SARS, the special anti-robbery unit of the Nigerian police force that was responsible for indiscriminate arrests, extortions, and extrajudicial killings. I'm sure many of you remember this. This was something that was very much being talked about just a few months ago. And yeah, it seems that this movement, where has it gone? Well, it says the dilution of SARS was a significant victory for EndSARS protests and millions of Nigerians who have been affected by police brutality. But the story was widely covered and generally celebrated in the international press. Far less well known, but equally important, is what happened next. The demonstrations split the movement with fatal consequences. When protests continued after the formal ending of SARS, a decision about which there was serious disagreement. Nigerian security forces attacked crowds of protesters and killed several people on October 20th. The internal struggles of Nigeria's main protest group and violent clashes between the state and its citizens may tell us a great deal about the country's future and the shrinking civil space under the Buhari regime. One of the most curious aspects of this story is the outsized role of the American social media company Twitter, whose company CEO, Jack Dorsey, chose to recognize and mobilize donations towards one faction of the EndSARS movement, inadvertently amplifying its divisions. The campaign to end SARS began long before many in the West had heard of it. In 2017, Segun Alsanya, a realtor and human rights activist, created a non-governmental organization called the Social Intervention Advocacy Foundation to advocate for victims of police abuses. The group promoted a two-pronged social media campaign: hashtag EndSARS, which focused on disbanding the police unit, and hashtag Reform Police NG, which advocated for police reforms. When Nigerians were arrested, extorted, or brutalized by SARS officers or other police, they immediately contacted Alsanya. His ability to effectively engage Nigerian police authorities and seek redress from many Nigerians brutalized by police instantly turned him into a social media celebrity. But whenever the EndSARS movement expanded into larger street demonstrations in October, Alsanya's role diminished. Some protesters even demanded a leaderless movement. Alsanya described it as a palace coup hit by his detractors and competitors to hijack the movement. He says that people began rewriting the Wikipedia page dedicated to EndSARS to minimize his contribution to the movement while promoting the role of others. Now, this is something I want to just talk about very briefly, because I see a lot of this in the modern context. A lot of people think it's revolutionary to ask for a leaderless movement. And that's not revolutionary, honestly, people. You can't have a leaderless revolution. You have to have people who are going to be the ones inside of an organized fashion, not autocratically, but organized fashion, actually be the ones to make plans, be the ones to create the programs, be the ones to create the ideology. Asking for a leaderless movement because we are afraid of leadership, because some of us have been brutalized by leadership, I think that's something that becomes a cop-out for many of us to not engage inside of struggle or to join organizations. Some of us just have bad outlooks of people who are going to direct our actions. But if you understand, there's never been a revolution that's been successful without having people who are going to be the vanguard of those revolutions. And I'm not saying necessarily this is a vanguard revolution situation, but this is something to take note of. The idea of having leaderless movements, that's actually very counter-revolutionary. And it's something that the capitalist system does intentionally to make us think that we cannot operate together, that we cannot come under one single banner, that we have to have different divisions and have to separately try to come and somehow get our demands met without actually coming together inside of a single organized fashion. So that's something that is very important to realize, that it's a trick. It's a trick that they use over and over again, but do not think that there's anything forward about this trick. It's actually something that's being used to ensure that the people who do not want us to be organized are able to keep us in a disorganized fashion. Now, a gender activist named Ndi Kato, who participated in the protests, disputed this characterization and insisted that the reality was much simpler. The campaign changed as it grew into a mass movement. She said young people wanted to hold the government accountable. Young people need to rise up, and young women showed up. It wasn't hijacked from anyone, she told me. While as Osanya deserves credit for his work in starting and promoting the movement, Kato thinks that he suffers from something of a savior's complex. Well, one of the groups that emerged as the protests escalated in size and importance was the Feminist Coalition, which created a nationwide system that worked to ensure the release of arrested protesters by raising and dispersing funds for the movement and establishing a legal aid service composed of volunteers. The Feminist Coalition is part of a long Nigerian legacy of women spearheading social movements. The article says it is mostly to the credit of the woman-led Feminist Coalition that the EndSARS protests endured after October 11th, when Buhari announced that SARS had been disbanded. The Feminist Coalition felt confident that unless protests continued, this would remain an empty promise. The demonstrations escalated domestically and abroad as members of Nigeria's diaspora in London, Berlin, New York, and elsewhere organized EndSARS protests in solidarity. Awosanya, however, considered the strategy of continued protests overly aggressive, unrealistic, and unsustainable. He later described it as the old system throwing tantrums, burning things, creating chaos, blocking roads, and inconveniencing the people. Isolated on the sides of a movement he had helped started, Awosanya found himself on opposite sides of some of his former allies. All right, now here comes the trickster. On October 14th, Twitter CEO Jack Dorsey got involved. He tweeted two links with the hashtag EndSARS. One, a page curating stories of victims of SARS brutality in Nigeria's tech community, and the other to the official website of the Feminist Coalition, a significant endorsement for the group. Dorsey went further with another tweet calling for Bitcoin donations to help EndSARS. Twitter subsequently created a tight fist emoji in the Nigerian flag to support the movement. With the help of Jack Dorsey's endorsement, the Feminist Coalition managed to raise $150,000 in Bitcoin donations after its bank account was deactivated by the Nigerian authorities. Twitter also took somewhat unusual steps of verifying the handle of the Feminist Coalition, as well as those of some of its members and other protest advocates. Twitter reserves its blue verification checkmarks for accounts it regards as especially prominent, authentic, and authoritative. However, Twitter did not verify Awosanya's account, even though it has more than 700,000 followers, nearly 4 times that of the Feminist Coalition, and had been the face of the EndSARS movement since 2017. The support of Twitter and its CEO was seen as a recognition and endorsement of the Feminist Coalition's leadership of the entire EndSARS movement. Twitter had inadvertently selected the leaders of Nigeria's social movement against police brutality and effectively escalated the rivalry that had already fractured the movement. Twitter really helped to amplify the movement, and that was a great thing, according to Kado, who supported the Feminist Coalition in this fight, but is not a member. I like that Jack cares about the causes, and this is one of them. In contrast, she points out Facebook took down some of the EndSARS posts on its platform, a move that the social media company subsequently apologized for. Now, bolstered by the endorsement it had received from Twitter and the tremendous goodwill it was now receiving from many Nigerians, the Feminist Coalition continued its protest campaign and fundraising on social media. In the days that followed, it managed to fund more than 154 protests across Nigeria and successfully raised more than $190,000. Okay, so let's get to this. One, I do not know a lot about the Feminist Coalition, and I do not know a lot about Awosanya's organization and what he was doing. So this is not choosing sides about who was the organization that was poised to really deal with this issue. Frankly, I have not read anything talking about colonialism, and you guys know I don't focus so much domestically on the different fights that we have with the corrupt governments, but I focus more so on this channel on the governments that are funding and that are supporting the colonial puppets and those who are very complicit but in the background. So this is not taking sides of one side or the other, but this must be emphasized. We cannot have people like Jack Dorsey, Twitter's CEO, choosing organizations that are going to be on the front lines of our struggle. We cannot have that, and we cannot look past that. We have to scrutinize that. And we have to know what happened behind the scenes that the Feminist Coalition even got this endorsement. And this is why things get very dangerous whenever you're talking about different organizations who get to be the voice of a certain movement. This is very much reminds me of the Black Lives Matter movement in the United States. The movement is something that was organic. The movement was African people in the United States saying we are sick of police brutality. But the organization, the one that got the funding, the one that got to be the poster child of the movement, the one that has lots and lots of different endorsements by different people, that organization is not at all representative of the average everyday African person struggling in the streets to be emancipated from a colonial system. So when you have an organization being picked by imperialists, then this is Jack Dorsey, multi-billionaire. I mean, this is someone who we do not look at as having the same interests as African people. You have to scrutinize that, and you have to know what did they do, what agreements did they make that would even make him comfortable enough to, one, give them funding, two, give them an endorsement, and three, find a way to undermine the opposition to that group. So these are things that are very, very much in need of scrutiny. Now, the other thing that I do want to point out in this regard is the issue of Bitcoin. Bitcoin is being used as a way to help the Nigerians. It's just so perverse how these people are. That's how it's being marketed. We're trying to help the Nigerians, even though we're going to be getting paid off of this whole scheme. So let's go to this next story. We're going to talk about Jack Dorsey. And this is a recent story about post-Buhari banning Twitter inside of Nigeria. He tweets support for Nigerian Bitcoin adoption, okay? Dorsey is one of the big celebrity names in the crypto community. As a result, his tweets on crypto pick up a lot of interest, no matter how cryptic or simple they are. He began his series of tweets simply with a single Nigerian flag. Look at that. He's waving a Nigerian flag. That means he's on the side of Nigerian people. This happened a day after the government announced that it would ban Twitter in the country. The ban came into effect as a result of Twitter deleting tweets by President Buhari. Later the same day, Dorsey published another tweet showing the Nigerian flag shaking hands with Bitcoin. This was followed by him tweeting, "The people of Nigeria will lead Bitcoin." This was a quote tweet over an open letter by the United States football player Russell Okung to the Nigerian president. Okung published an open letter in Bitcoin magazine. In it, he urged the Nigerian government to accept a national Bitcoin standard. In the article, he wrote, "Soon every nation will be faced with this decision, but those who seize the present moment proactively, as we have just witnessed in El Salvador, will enjoy significant advantages globally for generations to come." Finally, Dorsey's last tweet on the subject was a graphic showing Africa leading in peer-to-peer Bitcoin trading volume growth for 2021. This is not the first time the Square CEO has shown interest in crypto in Africa. In 2019, after he visited Ghana, Ethiopia, South Africa, and Nigeria, Dorsey said he planned to move to a country on the continent for a few months in 2020. However, because of COVID, he wasn't able to do that. In 2020, Nigeria became the second biggest Bitcoin trader in the world. However, the government's relationship with cryptocurrencies have been unstable. In September 2020, the Nigerian Securities and Exchange Commission announced a historic and regulatory framework recognizing crypto assets as securities. However, this doesn't mean that crypto is fully recognized. This is due to the central bank's position being in direct opposition. We African people, of course, must be opposed to Buhari's banning of Twitter inside of Nigeria. We're opposed to it because anything that would limit the voice of any average everyday Nigerians to the world, that is something that is going to be counter to our revolution. However, we also understand that any type of imperialist beneficiaries inside of the situation who will use Buhari as a scapegoat to allow them into a country for economic dominance, that is not our friends. So I encourage people, do not think that Twitter is on your side. Do not think that they are the ones who are going to fight Buhari for you. This is the things that they try to make us think implicitly. They try to make us think that we need a white man to fight for our cause. We need someone who's going to listen, someone who's going to be compassionate. You've seen how the one activist said, oh, well, yes, Jack Dorsey, we love that he cares so much about what's happening to the everyday Nigerian. Please understand, if there was not a buck in this for him, he would not say anything. He would not care. He would not even pretend to care like he's pretending. So understand, this is not a situation where this is your friend. This is not your friend. This is someone who is honestly your foe. But you don't understand that people will use your movements, use your slogans, use your flags in order to find ways to economically maneuver themselves inside of the African continent. They've been doing this for a long time. They've been doing this not just in the African continent, throughout the diaspora. This is what these corporations do. They're hungry for capital. They're hungry for dominance, and they will fund a group that you would think is pro-Black. And again, this is no commentary on which group is best or whatnot, but I'm just saying they fund groups that they see that they will be marketed as being pro-Black. But in reality, these groups many times are ones that are not going to directly challenge the system, the ones that pose the least threat. For example, you might find one who says, oh, police brutality, it's evil, police brutality, it's wrong. But another one who says police brutality is evil, police brutality is wrong, and police brutality is a manifestation of capitalism. Let's deal with the other one that just says that police brutality is evil and police brutality is wrong. Therefore, they get to look good. They're funding a Black group. They're funding a Black group that's dealing with the issue. Meanwhile, the groups that are directly challenging the source of that problem, those ones get quieted. These are the tricks that they're playing with us. So don't think that these philanthropists are for your liberation. They're for finding ways to keep you crippled, even if it looks like they're not. So it's just very important that we emphasize these things, that we research these things, and now we are aware that these people are very much looking for ways for them to get a payout at the end of the day. So that's all I have on this. I'm really curious to see all of your thoughts, and I will see you all in the next video. Hey family, this is Tyranny Cherie. I'm here to make an announcement that I'm very, very excited to make. I'm excited because I really think this is something that is important for our people. Otherwise, I would not have devoted so much time and energy towards it. So I finished my first book, and the book title is Fostering False Identity, the Child Welfare System's Design of Social Control of the Black Family. Now, why is this book something that I think will be very important for our community? Well, number one, it's dealing with the system of white supremacy, particularly the way that the system has targeted our children. If you don't know, our children are literally our future. Without our children, we have no future. And so understand that the system is very crafty when figuring out what to derail first. And to me, it's no mistake that the system particularly went after the Black family. If you look at what happened whenever we were enslaved by this system, and continues to go after the Black family, continues to go after Black children, continues to try to villainize African parents. So for that, I wanted to particularly talk about this subject. Now, the other thing that the book will deal with is our African identities. Why is it that our African identities are a threat to this system? Why is it that whenever we want to identify ourselves as being African, we get so much drawback inside of the Black community? I think a lot of us are not aware of the history of assimilationist thought inside of our community, this idea that we have to be close to white in order to be accepted. And so that's another subject that we delve into in this book. So I'm hoping that anyone who is, obviously, if you're a parent, a Black parent, and you really want to understand why it is that these systems are going after your children, I encourage you to read this book. I hope that it will arm you with a lot of knowledge and a lot of foresight, not just about how to protect your own children, but how to organize in your community, because that's really the purpose of the book, is to say that we have to organize among ourselves in order to protect ourselves from this white supremacist system. And then obviously, if you're an organizer in general, this is something that I think is important for you to read, because like I said, this is a subject in the Black community that we just don't discuss enough. Child welfare is not something that is going to get enough attention. People, obviously, will organize them around other causes, but this is one that is really important that I feel like we have to pay more attention to.